Ever wonder why people turn to extremist ideology? Why they insist on following it even to the potential detriment of their own families and countrymen? These questions and more will probably not be answered in this video. What if I look like a fucking sociologist? Today we discuss Konstantin Rodzaevsky, whose name I have yet to spell correctly without considerable effort on my part. He most definitely has nothing to do with any of the questions asked previously. Definitely. Konstantin Vladimirovich Rodzaevsky was born on August 11th, 1907 in Blagoveshchensk, way the fuck over in the far east of Russia. The family was decidedly middle class, which may be surprising considering, Siberia, but they were actually kinda chilling. His father had a diploma in law and worked as a notary, so things could definitely have been worse. He grew up in the household with a younger brother and two sisters, and as with the vast majority of people I have talked about, his childhood was quite normal, attending school and doing normal child things. The only thing of note is that he apparently joined the Communist Youth Union at some point. Yeah. He had no intention of remaining a communist though, because in 1925 he jumped across the Amur River and fled to Manchuria. He apparently did this without his family knowing, which, I mean, kind of a dick move, but whatever. It's also not exactly known how he got across the river in the first place, or why he wasn't stopped at any point. Keep this in the back of your mind, it will be surprisingly important later. His mother's attempts to convince him to come home were unsuccessful, so Rodzaevsky settled into a city that you may be familiar with called Harbin in northeastern Manchuria. His choice makes a lot of sense. It's just far enough from Russia for them to have no say in things, the local authorities were very anti-communist, and it was already full of a shitload of Russian expats, so he would fit right in. In 1928, his father and brother also made the run to Harbin to flee the communists, notably leaving the women behind, who were then all promptly arrested by the NKVD and either killed or sent to labor camps. Off to a flying fucking start with this guy, eh? While in Harbin, he would attend the Harbin Faculty of Law, which was a Russian emigre school in the city. Everyone there was a fervent nationalist because the Soviet Union was cringe, and this would reflect on Rodzaevsky by rapidly radicalizing his political views. Backtracking a little, a group of these nationalists in the school had founded the Russian Fascist organization in 1925. The Nazis didn't exist yet, so their beliefs were modeled off of Benito Mussolini and his goons over in Italy. Naturally, Rodzaevsky joined this group because when the people who are teaching you have funky views, you tend to gravitate towards them. He graduated with a law degree in 1928, and the next year would get married for the first time. They would have two children, but tragically both would die when they were very young. With his new higher education, a seething hatred of the Soviet Union, and a shitload of anti-Semitism, Rodzaevsky was on the road to true gamerism. The Russian Fascist organization would become the Russian Fascist Party on May 26, 1931, at the First Congress of Russian Fascists. Rodzaevsky had risen the ranks rapidly, being a smart guy and everyone's favorite pupil apparently, so he would assume the position of General Secretary. As you may know, Japan invaded Manchuria that September, so the RFP almost immediately began collaborating with their new overlords. As a show of goodwill and collaboration, the Japanese put Rodzaevsky in charge of the Culture and Education Department of the Bureau of Russian Immigrants in Manchuria, a position he would hold until 1943. In 1934, the RFP formally merged with another fascist group, the All-Russian Fascist Organization. Why yes, of course the Russian Fascist Organization is different from the All-Russian Fascist Organization. I'll have you know that who has a legitimate acronym is a serious point of ideological contention. This one was based in the United States and run by Anastasy Vonsyatsky, who is 100% getting a video of his own. The RFP sued for trademark infringement and integrated the VFO, and the party was renamed to the All-Russian Fascist Party, or VFP. Don't you just love having to remember 900 acronyms for bullshit like this? Their partnership did not last long, however, as Vonsyatsky had a very different vision for Russian fascism. Notably, he was not anti-Semitic and actually saw the Jews as potential allies against communism, which pissed Rodzaevsky the fuck off. So Vonsyatsky was kicked out of the party in 1935. Naturally, Rodzaevsky was elected head of the entire party that same year. All things considered, the guy was actually pretty good at politicking. He tried to LARP as Mussolini as much as he could, down to the mannerisms and vocal inflection. All accounts recall him as a great speaker and overall solid politician. He was also apparently a pretty stand-up dude, confident, reasonably athletic, and rarely partook in vice. I.e., as a party demagogue, he was very good at his job and was quite influential. During his time in Manchuria, he would also publish several books detailing his party and his plans for Russia. The primary ideological point of the party was that the Soviet Union was going to die soon, guys. I swear it's gonna happen. If you paid any attention in high school, you would probably know that the Prophet of Doom was, like, comically wrong. Like, Harold Camping levels of wrong. He predicted that the, quote, national revolution, end quote, would occur sometime before May 1st, 1938. That really came true, didn't it? Other than that, though, it was a fairly bog-standard fascist group. The party program called for corporatism, religiosity, no democracy, extreme nationalism, getting rid of the Jews, etc. They wore black emo uniforms and toted swastikas everywhere. They had newspapers, ranks, and even an anthem. Interestingly, they saw all of the peoples of the former Russian Empire, like the Ukrainians, Armenians, Bashkirs, Tatars, and 101 others, as kind of equal in standing to the Russians themselves, and the party line called for all of these groups to receive full Russian citizen status. And obviously, the party dedicated its existence to the death of the Soviet Union, and they would engage in several subversive activities within the Russian Far East, primarily involving propaganda. They also built a big fuck-off neon swastika on the border. It was pretty much built as part of a dick measuring contest that didn't really exist. Fucking least annoyingly self-centered fascist, I swear. Anyways, collaborating with the Japanese was very good for the bottom line as well. They saw Rodzaevsky as a useful tool in the event of a war with the Soviets, so they funded the party and allowed him to operate. He even got to meet with the Emperor on the occasion of the 2600th anniversary of the Empire, which is pretty cool actually. As part of their cooperation, Rodzaevsky also helped train the Asano Detachment, a white Russian military formation that served in the Manchurian army under Japanese command. It was fucking annihilated at Khalkhin Gol, rebuilt, and then annihilated again when the Soviets invaded. So naturally, things were going absolutely swimmingly. The party would peak in popularity around 1938, claiming a global membership of around 30,000 people, with little branches of the party existing across the world. Of course, though, this did not last forever. Briefly dipping back into the personal life, Rodzaevsky would divorce his first wife in 1936 and would marry again in 1937. He had 3 children, one of which died. The other 2, Vladimir and Olga, are still very much alive, I believe. As of 2018, they are American citizens and living in California. Small world, eh? Anyways, after 1938 came and went with no collapse, Rodzaevsky had a bit of an issue. This issue became a big fucking problem when the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed. Membership in the party dropped sharply after these events, as it was clear that the Soviets weren't going to spontaneously combust just yet. He railed against the pact, but there wasn't really much he could do. When Germany invaded the Union, Rodzaevsky immediately called for his Japanese allies to invade from the east. Uh-oh, bad decision, Konstantin. They responded by shutting down his newspaper because Japan had literally signed a neutrality agreement with the Soviets a few months prior. His overlords also considerably tightened his leash after this episode. He continued his propagandizing and agitation for a while until in 1943 shit started to fall apart. In May of 43, he got a visit from the Kempa Tai, who promptly arrested him and a bunch of his goons. They got suspicious for unknown reasons, but they figured he may have been a Soviet spy. Why did they think this? Well, when you cross a river into another country under mysterious circumstances, there is a very big chance that you had some help. The odds of him actually being a spy are very low, but that didn't stop him from being interrogated for a month. After his release, in July, the party was inexplicably banned and all of its functions were ceased indefinitely. Chances are that Japan really didn't want to piss off the Soviets now that his Pacific War was starting to drag on, so they smothered the party before it could do something really stupid. Regardless, Rodzaevsky was now very much out of a job. He kind of just existed in limbo until the end of the war. A few days before Russia invaded Manchuria, he dipped to Shanghai, leaving his family behind once again. He apparently missed them dearly, but still kind of a dick move. The vast majority of party members were jailed or shot in the days following the invasion. They seemingly knew where everyone was. I wonder what this could mean. While in Shanghai, possibly coming to the realization that he had lost, Rodzaevsky caved and decided to backtrack. He backtracked on Soviet communism and he backtracked on his anti-Semitism. He apparently decided that the Soviet Union under Stalin had become more nationalist than communist, that the Soviet Union was also the legal and spiritual successor of the Russian Empire, and that Stalin had solved the Jewish problem and had essentially beaten them into functioning members of Russian society. This switch very much could have been out of pragmatism, but he himself said it was because of a mental break. Whatever the reason, the Soviets saw their chance. The NKVD were able to coax him into returning to Russia under the belief that he would be granted immunity and a low-profile job as a journalist. On October 25th, 1945, he returned to his homeland. Uh-oh. Bad decision, Konstantin. He was immediately arrested and sent to Moscow, where he would be put on trial in 1946. The Trial of the Semenovites, as it was called, was a bulk sham trial of various white Russian immigrants that were captured in Manchuria, and Rodzaevsky stood among them. I'm not even going to try and sugarcoat this one. It's a Russian trial, you know how this goes. Alexei Bakshiev, Lieutenant General in the White Army, found guilty and shot. Lev Lazevsky, Lieutenant General in the White Army, found guilty and shot. Ivan Mikhailov, Minister of Finance in the Kolchak government, found guilty and shot. Lev Okhotin, member of the VFP, found guilty, sentenced to hard labor, died 2 years in. Edmund Semyonov, leader of the Transbaikal host, found guilty and hanged. Prince Nikolai Ukhtomsky, journalist, found guilty, sentenced to hard labor, died in Vorkuta. Boris Shepanov, White Army officer, found guilty and shot. Rodzaevsky was charged with everything under the sun for his creation of the VFP, his collaboration with Japan, and his anti-Soviet rhetoric. On August 30th, 1946, around 5 p.m., he was found guilty on all counts. Later that night, he was taken to the basement of Lubyanka prison and shot. He was 39 years old. In 1998, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation reviewed his sentencing, exonerating him from his charges of anti-Soviet agitation but upholding the rest, including his death penalty. In 2001, a few of his works were published in Russia, titled as Testament of a Russian Fascist. This book would eventually be banned in Russia for being extremist material, which I find really fucking funny. Like, how extreme do you need to be banned in fucking Russia of all bloody places? Ultimately, despite all of his efforts, his adventure with fascism amounted to pretty much nothing in the long run. He played with fire and got burned, and when he tried to run back to his homeland, he bit the bullet for his hubris. There is something almost tragic about how things ended up. Like I said, he was a very skilled orator and politician, and honestly, he was largely handicapped by circumstance. Perhaps in a couple timelines over, where Russia was a republic and fascism wasn't real, he could have been very successful. As a final note, he was also super gullible. Other than the fact that he willingly went back to Russia, there was also something else. The Japanese were concerned about a spy, but that spy was definitely not him. You see, the Soviets knew where everything was and exactly who to target, because the spy was actually Metkovsky. That about does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.